It is mid-July. I just picked my first tomatoes and I am already thinking about the fall garden. And today I want to talk to you about how I have planned my fall garden and why I even care about it right now in the middle of summer. Hi, my name is Rachel and this is Oxheart Gardening, and I live in South Carolina. I'm in the upstate and we have mild enough winters here that I can grow not just a fall garden but also into and through the winter if I choose my plants carefully and commit to giving them just a little bit of shelter on the coldest days. So even though it is midsummer, I'm already looking at fall crops that I can plant, things that I need to start indoors, and I've planned out when I need to start certain crops outdoors if I'm going to be direct sowing them. I've got my handy dandy notebook here and I'm just going to quickly go through all of the vegetables that I'm planning on having in my fall/winter garden. Onions, garlic, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, kale, lettuce, cauliflower, cilantro, carrots, turnips, rutabaga, radish, fava beans, and peas. So I want to start this off by saying I am still relatively new to the fall and winter gardening side of things, and this year I am really planning on, I guess, testing out the timings on everything. Last year I know I got things a little off, so I'm adjusting earlier and I'm gonna see if that switches things up as far as how productive my fall garden is. And I say this because I just want you to know that there isn't gonna be like an exact timing that you can just look up for these things. It is a little bit of a learning curve. There's a process you have to go through. If this is your first time planting a fall garden, you have to be prepared to like keep records of when you do stuff and figure out from there how to change things to make it better next year. Of course, there is a way to figure out kind of the general timing that you might want to use, and that is going to be looking at your first frost date. And this date is sort of just a gauge for when you might want to start things, and it is not necessarily going to define like a really exact time period when you have to start things. Usually with the fall garden, what you'll find is that you want to start stuff just a little bit before your first frost date and then plan to have it mature directly after your first frost date. A lot of these crops are much better once they've had a little bit of frost to them, and even are going to grow sweeter with the frost. So that's your things like kale, spinach, any root vegetables. Those are usually much better harvested after a frost. And if you live somewhere like me, then you're looking at planting with enough time before the frost so that your plants can grow big while there's just enough heat, and then harvesting after the frost and then into the winter. Especially for a lot of greens, I can grow kale all the way through the winter. I can grow Brussels sprouts all the way through the winter. And so what you have to do is look at your frost date, look at your low temperatures, and look at what the plants that you're planning on planting can tolerate and how much time they need to grow. What makes this even more difficult is taking into account the fact that things grow slower when it's cold out. So even though a variety might be like 30 days, for example, for radishes, they are super quick, but if you were to plant them when it's already quite cold out, then they're not going to take 30 days. They're going to take a lot longer. And that's where the trial and error comes in, especially for me, is figuring out how much longer things are going to take when it starts getting cool. And then the fact that you can't really control the weather and you have to kind of guess what things are going to be, it becomes quite a trial and error process. And I wish that I could give you a very direct answer, like start this on this day and it will be ready on this day, and it's just never going to be that simple. But what I can tell you is what I'm trying, and then let you watch how it turns out. So you're not just getting your own trial and error in your own spot, but you're also able to watch how my trial and error goes, and maybe the two of those together can get you where you're going a little faster. So all of these dates are based on my estimated first frost date of November 6th. And I have counted backwards from there to figure out how long ahead of time I need to start these things. So the first thing I want to talk about is Brussels sprouts. I definitely started these way too late last year. This year I'm trying two different start dates for them. I am starting them indoors because they need a long time to grow and it is way too hot out here for them right now. And this is going to be true of also things like broccoli and cauliflowers, these really big brassicas that need a long time to grow and don't necessarily do well in the heat of summer. So I already started some Brussels sprout seeds on June 26th, and I am starting some more tomorrow on July 23rd. And I'm gonna, this is about a month in between plantings, and I'm going to use that information to figure out kind of when the ideal starting time is for Brussels sprouts. Onion seeds are something else that I don't have a lot of experience with, and I'm very much just trying things to see what works. But this year I'm going to try and start my onion seeds in mid-August and then plant out those starts sometime around maybe October, November, right around the frost date, not too far after it if it ends up being early. Fava beans I'm going to plant in mid-August outdoors, and mostly I thought fava beans were mostly like a cool weather growing crop, but I think really what they are is they can grow in the warm and they can stand the cold. And definitely my fava beans did not get big enough last year, so I'm starting them even earlier in the summer and giving them time to kind of grow up. Cilantro I am direct sowing in September outdoors. I have end of September here on my list, and I'm doing that because cilantro is so sensitive to heat as far as bolting, but it still needs quite a bit of warmth to kind of get going and get vigorous in a reasonable amount of time. So I'm hoping that September is going to be a good date for that. I have lumped together broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage into one group, and those things I am going to be starting same as my Brussels sprouts tomorrow, July 23rd. It's somewhat mid-end July start for these things. Similarly, I've got turnips and rutabaga especially. The turnips are more of an experiment, but rutabaga for sure takes longer, so that also gets kind of lumped into those larger brassicas that need to be started indoors. My radishes, because they don't take as long, I am going to start them outdoors in mid-September, and additionally peas are going outdoors in mid-September. Kale and lettuce grow pretty fast. Kale takes a little bit longer to get established, but you can always harvest it young for tender leaves for salads. And because these things grow pretty quickly, I'm gonna try out succession sowing them throughout the fall and into the winter. So I'm gonna start them in big flats and then transplant them out about 2 weeks after they sprout. And I'm going to do this continuously throughout the fall and winter to keep myself in really fresh, tender, young greens. Garlic is the one thing that I know that I'm going to have probably pretty good success with, as I have with the past 2 years. So I am starting garlic outdoors in end of November, long after the first frost, and letting it grow all winter to harvest in midsummer. And then last on my list is carrots, and these also I've had a little bit of trouble with, especially with the timing and the germination. So I am going to be succession sowing them and kind of watching which planting time does best for them. But I'm starting this in end of July, so that's coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to succession sow them every 2 weeks from there until the frost. It's kind of ironic that I have so much trouble with carrots. I didn't my first year, and then every year after that I have had trouble, and that is the logo that I use is a carrot, so it's kind of funny. But you just gotta keep trying with these things, even the things that are really difficult. And so I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I hope that you can kind of take this methodology of try it out and see what happens, and hopefully learn what's going to be good for you in your area. I always get so annoyed with the things that say, oh, if you want to plant carrots, plant them during this month. It's just for who, where, in what climate? It changes so drastically depending on where you live, and you really have to take into account where you live and your climate, and even just this year's climate versus last year's climate as far as when to plant things. Something else important to note, even though I am direct sowing some things and starting some things indoors, everything except the carrots could potentially be started indoors. Carrots historically just transplant really terribly, and I've seen just a couple of people try and do it, but it seems like one of those things that you have to be really experienced to work with, or just really willing to muddle through the difficulty of transplanting them. So if you are new at gardening, the only thing I don't ever recommend trying to transplant while you're new is carrots. Alright, as always, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening!